the Spanish Club, it's developed by a client of ours, GURNER, on Johnson Street, Fitzroy, and it's really, it's as much as there's a development story, but then there's also a story of the club. And like many of these cultural institutions, they will tend to struggle financially, but they have really great assets in terms of the land that they own. GURNER were able to do a bit of a deal with them around developing the building into a residential apartment building, and then handing back a ground floor club to them at the end, fully fitted out. That would become the future of their ongoing club, which was it's sort of nice to be a part of I suppose a continuing story for the Spanish Club. So for us, this was sort of translating into brief is really about identities. How can the redevelopment sort of still, I suppose, serve its purpose, be relevant to the Spanish Club, and then also how can that translate into what we're doing with the apartments, people who didn't have an association with the club. Of course, the inevitable sort of maximising value when it comes to these types of projects, and then this idea of creating a timeless building that sits on the skyline of a reasonably undeveloped part of Fitzroy. So the site sort of sits between Brunswick and Nicholson. Fantastic view back to the city. It's on the northern side of Johnson Street. Again, largely there's a lot of development sort of down this end, not a lot down here. The club before we started, looking a bit sad and tired. Peach-coloured façade, some green detailing, a shop front that was very dark and oppressive. Nobody really knew what was going on within. And this was a view sort of in the front door through to their main wall at the back. Again, not the most inviting space, but a space which had been theirs for since 1969, so quite a long time. The site presented with fantastic opportunities for views and outlook to the north as well as to the south. Views over Exhibition Gardens back to the CBD, and then the sort of fantastic view over Fitzroy and beyond. Many people's association with the Spanish Club and with the Spanish community is all about the Spanish and Latin Festival. May it continue this year. It of course didn't last year. And the shot on the right is taken by a colleague of mine, enjoying the festivities and everything that the club had to offer on that day. The traditions of the Spanish people. So sort of founded in the late 60s, and then moving forward to where we are now. We didn't quite make the 50-year timelines and planning hurdles. Tripped that up, but it was a nice aspiration. Again, this is a quote from the director of the Spanish Club, that about this is the sort of social pulse of the Spanish Quarter. An early sketch that we did, showing a taller building, but an early sketch that we did of a concept of how a new building above could draw on the verticality of the existing facade. The site sits within a heritage overlay, but the facade's not protected, so we deliberately made the deliberate choice to keep it and to use it as I suppose because we were putting the club back into it especially, it felt like the right thing to do, that facade would be there, that there would always be that association with that place. And then we use that as a reference point to such a derived architectural response, which robust in nature, sort of timeless in character. Johnson Street's not the easiest street, but it's quite a tough environment, and part of our response was really about developing a building which could be animated in terms of how it opens and closes, but responding to sort of the acoustics and traffic noise. It's actually a nightclub across the road, which technically became a pain in the arse later, but that was all part of the fun journey. Some of the sort of reference points in terms of history and that sort of traditional vernacular started to come through in the response for the interiors and the architecture. So from the reinterpretation, the modernisation of this building, of this facade, was really about making the residential entrance as sort of narrow as practical to give as much back to the club to make sure that it has as big a frontage as possible, but then seeking opportunities to create the transparency between the two different uses. So you got that kind of symbiotic relationship between the two. You get that transparency, which worked out quite well, and a marketing render of the scheme. So the residential entrance being hard on the left, and then giving as much back to the club as possible. Elevation sort of section, it's sort of became a facade within a facade, and there was a lot of debate about this, the visual proportion of heritage to the contemporary edition above. Ground floor plan. Just talking through this, it's really residential entrance as narrow as practical, transparency between the residential entrance and the club space, providing a food and beverage offering at the ground floor, which gave the club a means of income to continue with, so they could continue to function and operate long beyond this occurring. Narrow laneway entrance off the back into rotating car lift into a couple of levels of basement below, and typical floor plan, which is sort of an H or an I, depending on how you're looking at it, shape, which is about sort of maximising the frontages where possible, and then introducing light via light courts. And a lot of debate with sort of planners and expert witnesses at VCAP about this type of approach, and it ended up us effectively kind of redesigning the whole block. It's like, well, if you continue this form of development along the street, would it work? And as you move up through the building, the footprint starts to get smaller, the apartments get bigger. Excuse the quality of that. This is a 3-bedroom apartment at the top of the building. So you get that view back to the city as soon as you open the front door. Mastered at one side, secondary bedrooms to the other. Open plan kitchen, living, dining with a sort of integrated fireplace and bits and pieces across the front. Some stats, so 32 apartments, 7 stories with a couple of levels of basement, and a good sort of diversity of product types. So not many 1-bedrooms, quite a lot of 2s, and then a reasonable amount of 3-bedroom apartments for a product like this, catering for investors, owner-occupiers, and various demographic, which is good. Photographs of the finished result. The ground floor fit out still under construction, hence the screening on it. Like I say, it was a robust design response to Johnson Street, picking up on the vertical elements of the building and translating them skyward. Winter gardens with integrated planting across the front. Again, so there's that connection through to nature from each apartment. The view out to the north, over Fitzroy. So then interior design is about referencing some of those, I suppose, Spanish, European patterns of tiling, and about creating objects within the space, deliberately exposing concrete surface to really gain more clear height, so that's sort of up at 2.9, which is really nice. Track lighting, coordination nightmare, but well worth it in the end. Same shot. So one of the apartments behind the heritage facade, so clear void between the two to let for light and ventilation, but you get this unique aspect over the top of Johnson Street when you're within the apartment, as you can see here. Some of the detailing. So we did two different colour options for the interior design, but the client gave the opportunity for everybody to mix and match it. So whilst this one was on point, some of them ended up being black and white with brass tapware instead of the black tapware, which is everyone has their choices. It's following a similar aesthetic through the bathrooms, putting windows where we can to get these wonderful views over the Fitzroy area. And this is a construction shot of the residential lobby. You start to see the vaulted ceiling being formed at the top, and those windows that get the connection through to the club on the right. And this was a bit naughty of the client, but during COVID, we finished the building, and they had launched a leasing campaign which led to queues out and around the corner. A bit, like I say, very, very naughty of them. It was, part of their sort of social campaign ended up to having huge crowds, which was inappropriate and ended up getting broken up by police. But interesting that it got such a following.